I discovered 3 terrifying true lighthouse horror stories that will haunt your dreams forever. I never should have opened that door. A chill swept through me like a cold wind slicing at my skin. The lighthouse stood tall against the night sky, looming like a dark sentinel. I'd always heard that lighthouses held secrets, but not like this. My routine was simple. I was the kind of person who found comfort in the mundane, waking up to the smell of coffee brewing, the sounds of the town waking up. But stepping into that lighthouse felt like crossing into another realm. The air grew still, heavy with whispers. Something wasn't right. The room was draped in shadows, darker than any night I'd known. I could feel the cold seeping into my bones. The walls seemed to pulse faintly, like they were alive, holding their breath while I intruded. The distant crash of waves sounded like screams echoing in the void. I stepped further in, and that's when I heard it faint rustling. No one else was supposed to be here, fear coiled tightly in my chest. Something was moving in the dark. My heart raced, pounding against my ribs like a trapdoor ready to burst open. The light at the top flickered ominously, illuminating fleeting glimpses of objects shifting from my peripheral vision. A chair creaked. My skin prickled. Was there someone else here? Shadows danced, twisting into grotesque shapes. I could have sworn I saw a figure standing just beyond reach, and then silence fell, a suffocating quiet that echoed louder than any noise, pressing down on me. I was not alone. I could feel it. Suddenly, the flashlight slipped from my grip, crashing to the floor. The darkness enveloped me, thick as smoke. And just as I bent down to retrieve it, the door slammed shut behind me with a resonating thud. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The door's resounding thud echoed in the silence, a finality that sent a jolt through me. Panic surged, tightening its grip around my throat as I scrambled to my feet, fumbling in the dark for my flashlight. My pulse was a frantic drumbeat in my ears, drowning out the distant roar of the waves. I felt like prey in a predator's den, blind and weak-kneed. The dim light flickered back to life, illuminating the room with a sickly hue. Everywhere I looked, shadows crawled, morphing into sinister figures that retreated just as I turned my head. I could feel the air thrum with a presence that squeezed the breath from my lungs. Something ancient, something wrong. My mind raced with thoughts of escape, but there was no turning back. The door seemed to taunt me, filled with the weight of grotesque possibilities. Was it locked? Was there even a way out? Just as I approached it, the light flickered again, and a low growl reverberated through the floorboards, sending chills racing down my spine. That I turned sharply, illuminating the far corner of the room, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever haunted me. The beam revealed nothing but the remnants of old fishing gear, cobwebs clinging to decayed wood. But something shimmered near the edge of the light, a reflection that shouldn't be there. A face, pale and contorted with despair, emerged momentarily before vanishing back into the darkness. My breath caught in my throat. Had I seen that correctly? Or was my mind playing tricks? Dread sunk deeper, as I realized the whispers I'd felt before were back, swirling around me, murmuring indistinct warnings. The room felt smaller, stretching and twisting into a claustrophobic embrace. I retreated to the spiral staircase that wound up into the lighthouse's heart, instinct driving me upwards, propelled by the hope that the beacon at the top could draw me back to sanity. Each step echoed, a hollow sound that resonated between layers of past and present, with the inescapable feeling that someone or something was following, inching closer with each heartbeat. As I climbed, the air grew thick with a bitterness that stung my nostrils, filling me with a terrible sense of foreboding. I stopped on the landing, breathless, and glanced back down the winding staircase. shadows shifted below. The darkness writhed as if alive, forming tentacles reaching for me. I pressed my back against the cold stone wall, the lighthouse now a living entity, breathing and pulsating, filled with something dark, something that could devour. Suddenly, the lighthouse's light burst to life, beams slicing through the gloom, illuminating the distant waves that churned below like a chaotic dance of souls lost to the stormy abyss. Hope flickered within me until I noticed the reflections in the glass. They were not mere images of the light. No, they were a distorted gathering of those who had come before me, twisted figures clutching at the glass as if trying to break free. Faces I recognized from my nightmares, eyes wide with the terror of the unknown, mouths frozen in silent screams. This was not just a lighthouse, it was a tomb, a prison for lost souls punished for stepping into its grasp. Then, as I clutched at my heart, a hand slammed against the glass behind me, heavy and desperate. I turned sharply, but before the light could reveal what lurked beneath, everything plunged into darkness again. The whispers crescendoed into a cacophony of anguish, and terror surged through me as I felt cold fingers curl around my wrist, pulling me backwards into the unknown. I gasped, grappling futilely, pushing against the unseen force dragging me into the void where shadows danced eagerly, waiting to consume me. Just when I thought I would be lost forever into the abyss, the light flickered again. But what greeted me in its fleeting glow was far worse than darkness. Looming over me, a figure cloaked in shadow, grinning with an impossibly wide smile, its eyes glinting like shards of broken glass. Ready to join them? It whispered, and the temperature plummeted, leaving me breathless with dread. And then, the whip of cold tore through me, and darkness swallowed the truth whole, leaving only a single, chilling thought: what had I awakened in that lighthouse? The moment the whispers morphed into sinister laughter, my heart thudded against my ribcage as if trying to escape. I stood paralyzed by the figure before me, the gaping maw of its smile too wide, stretching beyond any human capacity. My mind reeled, desperately grasping for logic, but reason slipped through my fingers like sand. Join them, it repeated, an echo that blended with the grotesque chorus of those trapped behind the glass. My eyes darted from the figure to the lighthouse light, its pulse strobing rhythmically an erratic heartbeat in an otherwise dead space. With a surge of adrenaline, I wrenched my wrist from the spectral grip, stumbling backward, the stone edge of the spiral staircase threatening to trip me. I gasped, forcing myself to turn my gaze from the smirking apparition and back towards the staircase. Each step down felt like a descent into madness, gripping the banister as if it could anchor me to reality, yet, every ounce of courage seemed to drain with the shadows. As I descended, the chilling embrace of the lighthouse encased me tighter, the howling wind outside cradling a sinister melody that mirrored my panic. The whispers clawed at my sanity, words muddled but thick with intent and urgency I couldn't decipher but inherently felt. Halfway down, the beam of the lighthouse flickered again. In that transient glow, I saw them twisted shapes of the damned standing waiting at the bottom step. Figures with hollow eyes and fractured smiles, mouths moving in silent pleas. Each part of me screamed to turn away, but morbid curiosity rooted me to the spot. The lost souls, each one an omen of my fate, a warning etched in ethereal gloom. Why were they pleading? Had they once felt hope, too, only to be ensnared in this cursed tower? A chill shot through me as the realization struck: they weren't merely trapped, they were waiting for something. Or someone. The figure from above joined their ranks, oozing down the staircase, contorting into unnatural shapes, each movement like a grotesque ballet, mocking my every breath. Why fight it? We're all connected now, it mused, its voice smooth as sleet, a sickly sweetness coating each word. Desperation surged through my veins as instinct overrode my horror, compelling me to flee. I stumbled down the last steps, launching myself into the hollow darkness of the ground level, heart racing, breath coming in ragged gasps. But the air was thick like molasses and something was waiting in the shadows that I squinted, trying to penetrate the heavy blackness, and my throat constricted as my flashlight flickered weakly, struggling against the gloom. From the periphery of my vision, I discerned movement, a series of small figures, crawling across the floor. Crabs? No, far too large. My stomach twisted as they crept into the beam of light, revealing rotting faces, mouths opened wide like silent sirens, a dark glint in their hollow eyes. They pitter-pattered towards me, driven by an instinctual hunger, their limbs strangely elongated with fingers that dripped with a viscous ooze, and that rancid odor seaweed and decay filled my lungs. I screamed, raising the flashlight, illuminating the entire chamber, but what I saw was worse than mere horror. The shadows loomed larger, coalescing into grotesque shapes, and I was surrounded. The whispers surged louder, screaming my name as if coaxing me to submit. It was all too much a suffocating whirlwind of noise, movement, and the heavy weight of despair. They were not only shadows, they were echoes of victims, forever caught in limbo, reaching out, clawing at my skin for a release that had turned into a curse, but amidst the chaos, a single thought clawed its way to the surface. Perhaps they weren't here to consume me but to warn me of what was yet to come, but there was no time to linger. I dashed for another door, praying it wouldn't lead me to deeper horrors. But as I shoved it open, a scream echoed from behind, cascading around me like crashing waves, freezing me in place. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach as the candlelit lanterns flickered to life, illuminating their ranks now standing shoulder to shoulder, the entity behind them merging into a grotesque silhouette framed by the light. Closer, it hissed, and like a dam breaking, a surge of horrified realization washed over me. The lighthouse was no longer just a lighthouse, it was a maw, and I was the next offering. Before I could move, they lunged forward, a thrumming, seething wave of darkness, and as they closed in, the last thing I saw was the ceiling darkening, twisting above me, warping into a mouth the lighthouse hungry for its next soul. The darkness swallowed me whole, consuming every breath, every pulse of thought. It was a suffocating downpour of despair, the air thickening with the weight of countless tormented souls as they engulfed me in their insatiable need. I braced for the impact of their wretchedness, but instead, a cold blade of wind swept through the chamber, pushing the nightmarish figures back for a fleeting moment. In that breathless instant, I caught a glimpse of the staircase behind me, bathed in the ethereal glow of the lanterns, a lifeline. I pivoted with a scream lodged in my throat, but the cry was lost in the cacophony of whispers that clawed at my sanity, urging me to turn back. Yet, instinct propelled my legs into action, driving me toward the swirling shadow that was once a means of escape. Each step sent sharp jolts of terror through my body, the soft pattering of those horrid figures resuming their hungry pursuit. The grand spiral stairs whirled upwards, a dizzying ascent that twisted my very essence. As I climbed, the whispers morphed into a dissonant symphony of voices, entwining past and present, begging, threatening, tormenting. "Let it take you," they chanted, their words brushing against my skin like icy tendrils. "You belong to us now." Heart racing, I pressed my back against the cold stone wall, struggling to catch my breath. I glanced down at the throng below. The twisted forms had amalgamated into one grotesque shape, more monstrous than before, a writhing serpent of lost souls clamoring for my descent. They settled around the base of the staircase, creating a throbbing vortex of anguish that pulsed in time with the lighthouse's warning light, but the top of the staircase promised only dread. The light above flickered, casting erratic shadows that danced along the walls of the narrow passage, deepening the feeling of being wedged in the maw of something ancient and malevolent. A creeping fog started to form like a living thing, a spectral mist, seeping up from below and wrapping itself around my ankles. Desperation steered me to the landing, where I stumbled through a heavy door into a small, dimly lit room that smelled of brine and rot. The air here crackled with unnatural energy, sending goosebumps rippling across my skin. I turned around, pressing my back against the door as memories began to warp around me. Shadows flickered at the edge of my vision, shapes not of this world, writhing and shifting just beyond the threshold. My eyes darted over the room in frantic search of an exit. Old maps hung torn and yellowed, detailing the surrounding waters and unmarked islands, their edges marked with ink as dark and twisted as the creatures pursuing me. Behind the rickety desk lay an old lantern, its glass coated in enough grime to swallow the flickering light. An overwhelming sense of urgency, a need to understand the depths of this horror, propelled me closer. As I reached for the lantern, time twisted, I was abruptly thrust into another vision. The walls around me pulsed, breathing with an ancient, malignant vitality, and my anguish became the current surging through the very marrow of the lighthouse. I was adrift on the quarry of despair, held captive within the memories of the lost. I saw those lost souls once more, their faces now floating in the air around me, mouths twisting in silent torment. They beckoned with a confusing mixture of desperation and warning, but amidst this vision, an even deeper horror clawed at my mind. What if each of them, in their unending lamentation, had once tried to escape this fate? I was living their failure, and the lighthouse was hungry for another sacrifice. Panic surged as the door rattled on its hinges, a cacophony of scratching disrupting the haunting visions. My breath hitched, I had to block it. I snatched the lantern and fumbled with the rusted mechanism, vision blurring as the sound of splintering wood echoed around me. With a flicker, the lantern ignited, illuminating the room with a warm, golden glow, momentarily banishing the creeping shadows. But my heart sank as the light revealed something unexpected: a mirror, cracked and dusty, reflecting my panic-stricken visage. The figure behind me was no longer a figment, it stood within the mirror's confines, eyes gleaming with malicious delight. "Found you," it hissed, its voice a bone-chilling rasp echoing back from the glass, low and predatory. As I turned, the door splintered inward, unleashing a rush of blackness that seeped through the cracks, pool-like, whispering promises of despair. The wretched forms surged forward, their contorted bodies merging into one as they threatened to flood the room, and in an instant, the light dimmed, a rush of air snuffed the lantern's flame, plunging me into a suffocating darkness where the entity's laughter melded with the wailing of the souls I had seen. "Join us," I stumbled back, the mirror's surface rippling like water, drawing me closer as a surreal calm enveloped my pounding heart. I felt an inexorable pull, an urgency to succumb to the darkness, as if it whispered that this fate might not be so grim after all. When the ground disappeared beneath my feet, the chaos of laughter erupted around me, and the last thing I could comprehend was that my scream was not mine, it was a harmony with the chorus of the damned. Then silence fell, heavy as a tomb, and from the depths of nothingness, a single, echoing thought emerged with icy clarity: I was not alone. The void stretched endlessly, a yawning chasm that seemed to swallow every ounce of light, memory, and identity. For a moment, I hovered in this suffocating abyss, frozen in time. Then, like a cruel puppeteer, the darkness yanked at my consciousness, and I was thrust back into a familiar nightmare: the lighthouse. I lay sprawled on cold, damp stone deep in the bowels of the structure. The air had thickened, laden with an acrid scent of mildew and despair that clung to my skin like a shroud. Anguished wails twisted and turned through the air, seeping into my very bones, and I instinctively tried to shield my ears from the unbearable cacophony. But it wasn't the only sound that assaulted me. I felt their desperation wash over me, invading my thoughts, lusting for my spirit. Slowly, I rose to my feet, shaking the disorientation from my mind. The lantern was still clutched in my trembling hands, its glass flickering weakly. I noticed it was strangely warm, too warm, almost pulsating, as if it held a heartbeat of its own. Staring at the shuddering glow, I felt a compulsion to breathe into it, to embrace its flicker. But the echoing whispers filled the space, urging, "Let it go." From the far-off depths of the lighthouse, an unmistakable sound punctuated the air, a low, grinding noise, as if the very stone was alive and shifting. My heart thudded in my chest as I ventured forward, drawn towards the darkness of the narrow hallway leading to the heart of this forsaken place. With each tentative step, the shadows closed in around me, tangible and suffocating, thickening as though they possessed a will of their own. The walls leaned inward, threatening to crush me, and I fought against the mounting dread that clawed at my mind. The lantern flickered again, illuminating the grotesque faces floating through the dark, a twisted gallery of anguish, and I felt sickened by the human emotions that flickered in their haunted eyes. "Help us," they cried, their mouths opening just enough to let out a wretched sound that echoed in my ears, a haunting echo of souls trapped in limbo. At that moment, I caught sight of an open door at the end of the corridor, its surface marred with streaks of dark red old blood. I knew instinctively. I stumbled toward it, the instinct to flee overpowering any rationality. As I crossed the threshold, the room beyond revealed a macabre sight: a circular chamber lined with haunting images of shipwrecks and stormy seas, each painting carrying a chilling inscription penned in a spidery hand. "Those who dare disturb the depths shall feel their grasp." The words swam in and out of focus, but the essence of warning was palpable. I felt the room pulsate with energy, a heavy wave of despair crashing over me like an unseen tide. Against one wall stood a large wooden table, its surface splintered and stained a sacrificial altar, perhaps. Scattered about were remnants of the past, rusted tools, bone fragments, and tattered clothing, all bearing the omen of long-forgotten lives. Terror gripped my heart anew. How many had treaded this path before me, and had they suffered the same fate? The lantern flared brightly for a heartbeat before snapping out, plunging me back into nausea-inducing darkness. My breath quickened. I could feel a presence rising from the depths, a solid weight pressing against my back as shadows unfurled and morphed into a staggering figure. It seemed to bubble forth from the very walls, from the centuries of buried sorrow and rage. "Leave this place," it rasped, the voice layered, both hauntingly familiar and disturbingly alien, like an echo from long-buried memories. "The lighthouse hungers. To stay is to become part of the lament." Before I could process the warning, the ground shook violently, a tremor that rattled my bones as if the lighthouse itself convulsed with rage. I stumbled back, colliding with the wall, and panic ignited within me. The whispers swelled into a frenzy, a chorus begging to be heard, and I was lost in their wretched cries. Then the door behind me slammed shut, sealing off any chance of escape. With a finality that turned my stomach, the darkness deepened, and from the shadows emerged a figure draped in tattered rags, its face obscured but radiating chilling awareness. My heart faltered. I was no longer just a visitor, I was prey, ensnared in a trap of unfathomable darkness and pain. "Once you see us, you cannot escape," it hissed, the voice intertwining with the cries of the damned, teasing the edges of my sanity. And then, like a burst of black ink, the figure surged towards me, melding with the shadows around us as another specter floated into view, and another, until the room crackled with malevolent energy. Just when I thought sanity would shatter entirely, the lantern exploded into blinding shards of glass, scattering light yet illuminating the truth that had lurked unseen. A swirling vortex of souls spiraled around me, their faces melding, converging into one amorphous mass. I saw the anguished expressions of those trapped, and with agonizing clarity, understood that their torment was my fate now. And as the figures drew closer, eager to taste the new horror that I was to embody, I felt the unmistakable sensation of cold fingers curling around my wrist, pulling me into the very heart of despair. "Join us," and in that moment of violent release from everything I knew, I vanished into the swirling void where existence twisted into an endless waltz of sacred terror. But instead of the end, a new reality tore into being, and with it, a terrifying truth unfolded. Surrounded by those who could never leave, I understood the lighthouse had chosen me for its eternal light. What awaited me in the depths? I couldn't tell, but a voice deep inside me whispered I was destined for even greater horrors. Suddenly, a light flickered from the shattered lantern, and I dared to hope. But the breaking reality revealed something worse. My own reflection, twisted and malevolent, echoed back, whispering secrets I had yet to comprehend. As the figures coiled around me, I felt the world tremble, and the last thing I could hear was that same chilling laughter repeating over and over, "Let the lighthouse eat." I was not alone, but as the walls trembled, I wasn't sure that I wanted to be found. The echoes of the unearthly laughter faded into the distance, replaced by the insistent thudding of my own heart, which now felt like the only sound anchoring me to this horrifying reality. The vortex of twisted faces dissolved with a final, anguished wail, and I found myself standing alone in the circular chamber once more, yet the air hummed with a new intensity, a cloying tension that sent shivers racing down my spine. That it wasn't just the walls that pulsated now, the very stone beneath my feet seemed to vibrate with malevolent energy, as though the lighthouse fed upon my fear. I looked down, horrified to see crimson streaks snaking from beneath the altar, as though the lifeblood of the forsaken had pooled to ensnare me. The dim light that flickered sporadically revealed nothing but empty shadows, yet my senses screamed that I was watched, observed by eyes filled with malice. "Help us," a raspy whisper curled through the air, chilling me to the bone. I whirled around to face a spectral figure materializing from the walls, an unmistakable sorrow etched on its translucent visage. It extended a hand toward me, fingers elongating as if trying to bridge the chasm between life and unending torment. "You must free us." I staggered backwards, the memory of what had just happened gnawing at the edges of my resolve. The lantern shard still dusted the floor, catching stray glimmers of dim light, but it was beneath the altar that the shadows writhed with a life of their own, and I could swear I saw something pulse there, bulging and retreating, as if excited by my presence. "Leave this place!" I cried, clenching my fists, fighting against the tide of despair that sought to wash over me. The figure remained, its eyes hollow yet pleading, and the whispers of countless souls spun into a deafening cyclone of yearning. "Only you can break the cycle, only you. Find the heart." Each word trembled through the air, carrying not just urgency but an underlying terror that ensnared my breath. "What heart? What are you talking about?" I pleaded, wincing at the power behind the wails that echoed through the chamber. I turned to escape, to flee back down the corridor, but the ground convulsed beneath me. The very foundation of the lighthouse screeched a relentless war cry that sent my heart racing. "The heart lies below," the figure intoned, and its mouth transformed into a grotesque shape, widening into a ghoulish smile that set me reeling in revulsion. "You must seek it. Only then can you help us." Against my better judgment, my curiosity burned as fiercely as my fear. How low could the heart reside? What unspeakable horrors awaited? But as my feet carried me backward toward the corridor, another chilling cacophony erupted from the chamber. A tortured symphony of groans and cries rose from the altar behind me. Suddenly, a glistening object emerged from the shadows where the shadowy figures had begun to dissolve back into the darkness. It was a tarnished latch, frantically pulling and pushing, as if alive, a portal beckoning me closer. My heart raced, torn between a primal desire to escape and the morbid curiosity compelling me to uncover the lighthouse's darkest secrets. As I hesitated, the walls began to reshape, contorting as darkness pressed in from all sides, rendering me blind to the light I had longed for. A feral growl erupted from the depths, an inhuman outcry seeping from the walls. The figure shrieked in agony, its own body convulsing in an inexplicable dance of torment. "Find the heart," it rasped one last time before dissolving completely into the shadows, its final moments captured in a swirl of dread that clawed at my mind. An ominous feeling settled over me as I realized I was no longer in control. The darkness stirred hungrily, thickening around my limbs, attempting a vice-like grasp. I took a step toward the portal, drawn into its promise of revelation. "No!" The tortured whispers crescendoed, an anguished echo that engulfed my senses. It was too late. I had crossed the threshold into unfathomable darkness, and as the latch creaked open, I was pulled into a narrow staircase spiraling down. Cold air whipped around me like the breath of forgotten souls, sending spasms through my already overwrought body. With each step, a cacophony of whispers circled closer, growing fainter yet more insistent, as if warning me of the fate awaiting those who dared venture deep. I descended into oblivion, the air growing impossibly still, and the flickering shadows morphed into swirling forms, obscuring my vision. Panic clawed at my resolve. Every time I thought I could recognize a human face amidst the swirling chaos, it morphed into something grotesque, a horrid display of agony twisted by the eternal grief of those lost to the lighthouse. As I reached the bottom of the staircase, a cold draft brushed past me, carrying the faintest hint of salt and decay. The final step cracked under my weight, and I blinked against the sudden glimmer of phosphorescence illuminating a vast cavern. Dark waters lapped at the edges of the stone floor, reflecting a carnival of shadows dancing above a haunting tableau filled with trapped souls and the unyielding watch of the lighthouse. And at the center, rising from the depths in all its terrifying grandeur, an endless black maw, its teeth sharp and glistening, pulsating with a rhythm akin to a heartbeat, an insatiable void seeking new prey. With a tremor of realization, I understood the consequences of my curiosity. The heart was not an object of salvation but the very essence of hunger itself, and I was its next meal. As the luminous figures began to form around me, their torturous wails spiraling toward a deafening crescendo, I felt the air grow heavy, burdensome with the weight of their thirst. "Join us," the abyss beckoned, a siren-esque call. In my heart, I knew that dread was merely the prelude to the horror that awaited me, and as I stood paralyzed on the brink, I gasped, "What now?" At that moment, the darkness splintered, and something ancient stirred beneath the waters, rousing a force that sent shockwaves through the cavern. Desperation clawed at my throat, and the last image burned into my mind was a dark, twisting figure rising to meet me, and then, everything consumed me, as I plummeted into despair, unsure of what I would find in the grasp of the heart. The sensation of falling ceased abruptly, replaced by the oppressive weight of stillness. I landed on a slick surface that smacked like flesh against stone, the cavern enveloping me in a suffocating embrace. The air was thick with moisture, and a deep chill seeped into my bones, sending my heart racing once more that I struggled to rise, my limbs heavy as though I had been submerged in the ocean's inky depths. Sharp, acrid scents burnt flesh mingled with brine invaded my nostrils, causing my stomach to churn. As I pushed myself upright, the flickering luminescence revealed a cavernous expanse that twisted in surreal shapes, casting elongated shadows that taunted me with their grotesque semblances of life. "Help us!" the plea reverberated around me, but this time it was not just one ghostly shadow. Multiple voices melded into a singular, haunting cry that echoed off the cavern walls. An inhuman chorus, 1,000 souls in lamentation, bursting forth from the very stone that my heart thudded painfully in my chest as I turned in circles, seeking the source of their torment. The light danced erratically, only to reveal two split faces emerging from the cracks of the cavern, wretched, twisted visages marked by the cruelty of time and despair. They mouthed words that never formed, their eyes hollow but glimmering with an intensity that drilled into my very being. "Leave this place!" I shouted, but the sound was swallowed by the oppressive silence that followed. In response, a low throbbing emanated from the maw of darkness at the cavern's center, pulsing violently, as though the heart itself was an enraged beast awakening from eons of slumber. Suddenly, the walls began to shift, pulling closer as if tightening a noose. I backed away, the wet surface beneath my feet slippery and treacherous, threatening to send me sprawling again. The souls surrounding me wailed in agony, urging me forth, but panic clutched at my mind like a vice. "Seek the heart." The shadows pressed forward, fingers extending toward me in a grasp that felt all too real. They enveloped my arms, cold and clammy, dragging me toward the depths of the cavern. I stumbled but somehow remained on my feet, the phantom hand still enticing me forward, pulling me closer to the abyss that I in their grasp. Memories began to flare, a vivid retraction of the joys of life versus the stark horror of death. Family faces, laughter in the sun, nor the ethereal joy contrasted with the pained expressions of the figures before me. I slapped my hands to my ears, desperate to block them out, but the clamoring in my mind only intensified. Ahead, the pulsating heart loomed larger, swallowing the dim light and casting eerie shifting shadows across the stone. It glimmered as though alive, wet and slick, each pulse more chaotic than the last. I felt its magnetic pull as if it were calling to me, its desires coiling around my consciousness like a serpent ready to strike. "Fear it!" I screamed, though my voice trembled, reverberating into the void, swallowed by the cacophony. "Stay back!" But I was trapped, there was nowhere left to run. The walls closed in, the voices crescendoed, and suddenly I understood I was not here to uncover the heart, I was destined to become part of it, a sacrifice to feed the horrors festering within. And then, amidst the shrieks and the madness, an image erupted within me, a sliver of light thrust into the endless night. It was my escape, an ethereal glimmer suspended in a sea of darkness. Hope ignited my resolve. I focused on it, inching backward, blindly fumbling for an exit that felt almost as intangible as the voices grasping at my mind. Just as the cavern threatened to close its jaws around me, I lunged toward the light, clawing my way back. But an unseen force lashed out, sending me crashing down once more on the malignant ground. The moment I regained my senses and dared to look behind me, the darkness writhed, the shadows wriggling like the snakes of some twisted underworld. Faces nestled among them, each morphing into an expression of murderous glee. Then the ground began to quake, and the wall closest to me cracked open, revealing an unseen expanse painted in black. With a deafening roar, the cavern heaved, and breakage coursed through the air, causing teeth-shattering vibrations that reverberated against my bones. I stumbled, flailing for balance, as a jagged fissure opened before me, a portal into the blackness, howling as though begging me to enter. Time elongated, twisting into an eternity where I was torn between despair and determination. The last thing I glimpsed before being pulled into the churning void was those haunting figures, their screams melding into the roaring chaos, eyes wide with a blend of fear and unholy hunger. "Discover the heart!" They shrieked in unison, their wails echoing as I fell into the abyss, the shadows closing in around me, snaring my limbs like a tangled web. As I plunged deeper, the sensation of falling transformed into something more grotesque, into the feeling of being swallowed whole by despair itself. And just before the darkness swallowed me completely, a flicker of realization pierced the void. The heart was not just my salvation, it was to be my very sacrifice, and then I was gone. The void devoured me, an endless expanse of darkness where the air crackled with forgotten pain. Time bent around me, seconds stretched into hours as I floated in an eerie suspension, the cries of the lost growing fainter until they were mere whispers lost in a vast ocean of silence. Yet I felt a pulse deep and rhythmic drawing me in, the heartbeat of the cavern echoing within me like a war drum heralding inevitable doom. Fingers of shadow reached up, curling around my limbs, pulling me in every direction. At once, I felt weightless and bound to this labyrinth of desolation, as if the very essence of the cavern had woven its tendrils into my soul. I gasped for air, my lungs burning, but the air was heavy and thick, saturated with an unbearable anguish that wouldn't let go. Suddenly, a piercing light ignited behind me, an orb of luminescence that flickered and flared as though desperate for recognition amid the oppressive gloom. The shadows recoiled, hissing in outrage, but I was spellbound, pulled toward the radiance like a moth drawn to a flame. Each heartbeat synced with the undulation of that light, and I could feel my senses sharpening. My body remembered warmth, remembered laughter, and the sound of waves crashing against a shore. That I stumbled through the void, propelled by memories that surged within me. My feet, finally catching on the semblance of solid ground, found a path that inclined upwards, littered with sharp stones and debris that crunched unnaturally beneath my weight. With each step, the radiant sphere morphed into a beacon, its glow illuminating gnarled roots winding around the cavern walls, grotesque caricatures of life that writhed as if sentient. The deeper I delved into the familiar shadows, the more urgent the pull of the light became. I reached out, fingertips grazing the shimmering surface, and a warmth washed over me so familiar yet foreign. Images flooded my mind, my childhood home, the freshly painted porch with dreams carved into its frame, and a rustling breeze calling me outdoors. The laughter of friends echoed in my ears, and I could almost feel the sun's embrace, but that warmth was suddenly pierced by an icy chill that snaked up my spine, swiftly morphing the nostalgia into dread. In that flood of comfort, a sinister realization dawned upon me. The memory was a facade, a wicked mirage crafted by the entity that thrived here. The heart was luring me closer, feeding on my longing, and I felt a new satiation in its pull, a hunger that was no longer mine. Fear persisted, it took root and blossomed, a vine wrapping around my heart and squeezing tighter. I had to escape, yet another sound emerged from the darkness, a voice, soft and lilting, yet twisted with malice. "You have come back to us," it sang, discarding its earlier urgency. "You long for what you lost. Left behind, forgotten. We can give it all back, but there's a price to pay." Layers of shadows began to unfurl before me, each revealing memories that shouldn't have been unearthed. I saw faces of family, their smiles slowly bending into grotesque grimaces, eyes hollow yet wide with insight. Their mouths opened impossibly wide, forming shapes that morphed into a language I couldn't understand, yet it knotted my stomach with dread. How long had they dwelt here, trapped in this hell? With harsh determination, I turned my back on the memory, raising my hands defiantly as I stumbled from the beckoning glow. Yet behind me the whispered promises rose to a crescendo, thrumming against my skull, a chorus of love shaped into despair. "Stay with us. Become one with the heart." I felt the ground tremble as shadows slithered closer, angry and twisted. Their cries grew frantic, longing to reclaim what was their dominion. I bolted forward, heart racing, pulse quickening with each desperate step. The cavern's walls pulsed around me, closing in as though the darkness was sentient, aware of my betrayal. The heart now felt like a beast watching from its lair, knowing all too well that I was receding, slipping from its grasp. But as I ran, shadows erupted from the corners, melding and morphing into figures shaped from the very essence of despair, twisted silhouettes of the lost souls I had encountered earlier. Their voices rose in a cacophony that bubbled and boiled, creating a whirling tempest of agony. "You will join us." With each step, the cavern warped around me, fires igniting along the walls, shadows reaching out like snakes hungry for flesh. I felt the darkness encumbering my spirit, like it was a predator stalking its prey, swirling and thrashing, growing more voracious. But just as it seemed I would be consumed, I surged forward, throwing myself toward the radiance ahead, thrusting out my arms as if that light could save me from the phantoms closing in. As my fingers brushed against the heart of that pulsating light, a revelation tore through me, a flash of existence that illuminated the truth. It was a heart that fed not just horror but fulfillment, both light and darkness coalesced within it. Those that surrendered became eternal, those that fought were devoured, the ground beneath me cracked wide open, and the shadows howled a chorus of despair that echoed like thunder. Instinctively, I dove into the light, and in that brief moment of clarity, I felt the cold fingers of despair grasp at my legs, pulling me back into the darkness beneath. Then, just before the light could engulf me completely, an icy grip latched onto my throat. I was yanked back hard, dragged backward into a sea of desperate sound, darkness swallowing me whole. As I gasped for air, the last thing I saw was the glow flickering violently, beating against the weight of shadows that surged forward, swallowing me into their wretched arms, and in the aftermath, the words echoed in my ears, "Your journey has just begun." I awoke, gasping, my fingers clutching at the damp earth beneath me. The shadows had receded slightly, evaporating into the corners of my vision, but I sensed them lurking, waiting to reclaim me. The cold, clammy air was heavy with an acrid scent that clung to my skin like a mist of decay. My heart thundered in my chest, a heavy rhythm that seemed, if only for a moment, to drown out the insistent whispers caressing my thoughts. Cautiously, I rose to my feet, the weight of dread tightening around my soul. The flickering light had vanished, leaving only darkness interwoven with the distant echoes of tortured souls. This cavern was no longer just a space, it was a living entity, breathing with my fears and sorrows, shaped by those who had come before me. I had entered a maze where threads of despair tangled into a tapestry of suffering. The shadows shifted, coiling tight against the edges of my mind, the soft whispers morphing into shrill cries. I pressed forward, feet shuffling through the debris of broken memories, wooden fragments, remnants of forgotten whispers. Each crunch echoed and sparked anger from the darkness. I risked glancing back, half expecting to see those abominable figures pursuing me, their faces twisted into grotesque masks of longing. Instead, an emptiness loomed behind me, a gaping maw where the heart had pulsed with light, now reduced to desolate blackness. But as I turned my focus back to my path, a saying etched itself sharply in my mind: to seek the light is to seal your fate. Racing to escape that truth, I plunged deeper into the cavern, my mind swirling with desperate thoughts. It had to end, somehow. I needed to sever myself from this nexus of wretchedness. I could almost visualize the exit, a minute pinprick of clarity amidst the crushing darkness, urging me to reach beyond the abyss, but the air thickened. Each breath felt labored, more demanding than the last, like inhaling shards of glass. The stone walls began to vibrate, responding to something unseen, the cavern itself thrumming in anticipation. Just then, the floor beneath me trembled, and a low rumble echoed through the crevices like a beast awakening from centuries of slumber. Suddenly, a piercing cry sliced through the air, freezing me in place. It was the voice of a child, shrill and filled with despair, beckoning me toward the darkness I had fled. "Help me! Please, help me!" It was a plea that morphed into a shriek, echoing with unbearable sorrow that churned my stomach. The sound was so desperate, so raw, it rooted me to the spot that I fought against the pull, my instincts screaming to run, to shield myself from whatever unholy horror awaited. The cries layered over one another, forming a horrifying symphony of pleading voices. Each voice painted a snapshot of agony: the child lost and abandoned, the mother in torment, the husband pleading for forgiveness, sinister shadows weaving in and out, each story etched into the air like living scars. My heart pounded louder, thunderous against the backdrop of weeping souls. I stumbled forward, away from the cacophony, but the ground beneath me began to crack further, fissures opened like a colossal maw, eager to whisk me into its depths. The very fabric of reality trembled, shaking with the weight of despair I had inadvertently awakened. Join us. Become part of the story. The murmurs beckoned, tender and cruel all at once. Tendrils of darkness extended toward me, curling around my ankles, a touch both electrifying and revolting, tugging me toward the rifts. Faces peered out from the shadows, mouths forming words I couldn't quite catch, their eyes brimming with a terrible combination of longing and fury. The cavern began to swirl around me, dark mist coalescing into figures, their sorrow unmistakable, tugging at my spirit. I was drawn, mesmerized by the suffering in their eyes, the unquenchable thirst for release. I could feel the weight of unfulfilled desires nearly crushing me. "You can help us," they pleaded in unison, voices blending into one. "You can help us be free." As their cries resonated within my head, images began to materialize, flashing memories of my own life, laughter with friends that morphed into bitterness, joyful moments forever stained by betrayal, secrets I had buried deep within the recesses of my mind, each memory a weapon forged by the heart's wickedness. Just as I felt my resolve begin to waver, a shadow erupted from the darkness behind me, its visage grotesque and vast. It moved with unnatural speed, an enormous form with tongues of darkness reaching toward me like a net seeking to ensnare its prey. I stumbled back, my breath hitching in my throat as I turned and ran, the insatiable void gnashing at my heels, but as I dashed further into the heart of despair, I realized with morbid clarity that the darkness was evolving, changing tact. It was no longer just a part of the environment, it had become sentient, a sentient predator stalking me. It morphed, shape-shifting with every step I took. The faces of the damned seemed to strain against the surface of the shadows, impossibly attempting to breach the confines of this twisted realm, desperation and rage saturating their existence. Ahead, I spotted a flicker of dim twilight, an end, a way out. I raced toward it, footsteps pounding violently against the gravel until I reached an archway that shimmered faintly, the air alive with a sweet scent of freedom. But just as I crossed the threshold, icy tendrils of shadow gripped me fiercely, yanking me back hard, tearing me from the precipice of escape. A voice erupted just behind me, deep and guttural, sending chills racing down my spine. "You cannot run from what you have become." Time paused as I felt the darkness pulling me further, drawing out a burgeoning rage within. No longer did I wish to scream in fear, but in unyielding defiance. With one final wrench, I twisted, positioning myself to face the encroaching shadows and their monstrous embodiment. I locked eyes with the unfathomable void, knowing that whatever ultimate truth resided behind those abysmal depths would determine my fate. As my body descended into an embrace of utter darkness, a stark realization enveloped me. The heart was not merely a desolation, it was a mirror reflecting the very essence of what we've kept hidden all along, and I would need to wield it against the horrors waiting to claim me. And just like that, the void flashed, the figures howled, and I found myself standing precariously at the very edge of oblivion, the final tendrils of my existence stretching into an abyss, hesitating at the cusp of being devoured entirely. Without warning, I felt the darkness rush in, ready to swallow my last breath, when a chilling voice whispered, "Your past is the key. Embrace what you fear, and we shall set you free." In that moment, everything went black. I awoke in the same dark chamber, disoriented yet acutely aware of the menacing presence that enveloped me. The echoing cries of the damned echoed through the walls like a twisted choir. I was alone, but the memories of their faces lingered vividly in my mind. It felt like being pulled in two directions, one toward their desperate pleas, the other urging me to flee. A cold wind sharpened my senses as I jumped to my feet, my surroundings narrowing into focus. The softly pulsing darkness was now a kaleidoscope of shadows, twisting like phantoms that danced against the walls. Through the flickering light from somewhere unseen, I perceived their despair faces stretching into grotesque shapes, mouths pulling up into manic grins before distilling down into wails. I gritted my teeth, knowing I had to confront them or risk being consumed by their torment. "Help us," they chanted, their words wrapping around me like lingering smoke. "You are one of us." But it was their eyes that struck me the most, those hollow, pleading stares seeped with sorrow and pain, the weight of countless lost souls blanketing this place. I took a step back, heart racing as dread clawed at my insides. My mind was a jumble of horror and confusion, the darkness whispering lies, urging me to let go and embrace the inevitable, but then a spark ignited within me, fueled by fierce defiance. I would not be another sacrifice. I forced myself to remember the lighthouse was a culmination of fear, despair, and betrayal, but it was also a mirror. My past was entangled with this very darkness. I understood in that moment, I had to confront what I had buried and become one with the truth. Your suffering won't end unless you face it. I shouted, feeling the surge of courage course through me. Show me the heart. The shadows hissed, recoiling, and I pressed onward through the chamber, following the path of the pulsating darkness. I moved deeper into the bowels of this wretched place, where tendrils of despair wrapped tighter around my throat. The air thickened, pushing against me like a wall, but the pulsating glow was all-consuming, calling me closer. Suddenly, the cavern opened into a grotesque altar bathed in darkness. A gaping maw of an ancient beast lay before me, seething with hunger. The heart, its form twisted and monstrous, pulsed erratically, piercing through the blackness like a grotesque beacon, simultaneously consuming and illuminating the anguish around me. But what shocked me most were the figures manifesting from the shadows. They were not merely broken souls anymore, they were reflections of my own fears, my insecurities and regrets materialized in front of me, undulating and writhing. I saw my mistakes, the lives I had broken, and the love I had lost. Each visage a reminder of what I had tried to bury for far too long. I had ignored the parts of me that hidden away. Face your darkness. Their voices rose, echoing through the chamber with a force that rushed through me like a tidal wave. A chilling realization gripped me. This was the final confrontation with my own darkness. The heart wasn't just for the lighthouse, it was a gateway, a vessel for my torment, designed to draw everything that once made me strive to rise above. Come to me, it whispered, seductive and sharp, a chorus of voices urging to wrap around me, to embrace me wholly. Become the heart. But I couldn't let it win, I wouldn't allow it. With trembling resolve, I reached inward, unearthing the bitter essence of those memories and the pain of the past. One by one, I pulled them into focus, feeling their raw truths burn through me, a cleansing fire. That I faced the entity behind the heart, those soulless eyes watching with growing intensity. I acknowledge you, I declared, each word gaining strength. I acknowledge the pain and all of the darkness. You will not consume me. I set you free. I hurled my fears toward the heart, feeding it with the very essence that it had longed to trap. The pulse of the heart faltered, a strange turbulence slicing through the darkness. The shadows shrank back as if charred by the fire ignited within me. I embraced the specters, my voice weaving among them. You're free, your whispers will no longer haunt me. Light burst forth with a furious insistence, enveloping the cavern, and I could feel the tendrils of darkness slip away, the shackles of their despair crumbling like weakened stone. Together, we surged toward the heart, illuminating the layers of undulating shadows that clawed hungrily around us, but just as hope swelled within me, I felt the air shift violently. A fierce roar emanated from the heart, a cacophony of anguished souls colliding, caught between being liberated and consumed. The darkness writhed fiercely, angry at being cast away, slashing at my spirit. You cannot escape. It boomed, but my heart was unyielding. No. I screamed as the light intensified. I am not afraid. It felt like a heartbeat, then an undeniable thrum that coursed through my veins, and in its rhythm, I found my own. I understood now truth had power, and my resolve fractured its ancient grip. As the final words passed my lips, I plunged into the pulsating heart, shattering its core with a brightness blinding in its purity, and it shattered around me, dark tendrils unraveling like smoke vanishing in the air. The cavern convulsed, walls shattering, echoing with unearthly wails and the cries of the souls finally released, but in their place, I felt the chilling darkness rise again, unfurling like a wound refusing to heal. With thunderous force, I realized too late that the nightmare was not banished, it had merely rearranged, lurking with an insatiable hunger, a hunger that would explore the fabric of my unspoken fears anew. I looked back one last time to witness the shadows clawing at the edges of my memory, the lighthouse looming in the distance, its diabolical light beckoning me again. You may have escaped momentarily, but I am still here, waiting, a voice whispered softly in the echo of that cage of familiar darkness. And I understood, as the last remnants of the illuminated landscape melted away into night, that a piece of me would forever remain lost to the lighthouse. I took a breath, feeling the coldness wrap around me like a cloak of inevitable dread. Let it haunt you forever, it murmured, the echo cascading through the darkness as I faded, leaving nothing behind but the chilling resonance of fear, "You're never really free."